I make the distinction between blame and responsibility.
Okay.
Blame says that you did something that you could have done otherwise, and so therefore you're at fault. That's what blame says. Responsibility says, yes, you did this to yourself, but not consciously or deliberately. You did it because you're programmed to do it by your own childhood experience, which in turn was programmed by your parents' childhood experience. So there's nobody at fault. Everybody does their best. But we do pass these unconscious patterns on. And you don't blame people for having unconscious patterns. You try to make them conscious of it so they can take responsibility for it. So there's no responsibility without consciousness.
Yeah.
And so, and there's no blame. So I don't blame anybody for their illness. I don't blame their parents either. But I do say these unconscious patterns have been passed on, and these unconscious emotional dynamics have an impact on your physiology. That's all. And if you want to have an impact on your physiology, you got to get conscious. You have to realize what have you been doing unconsciously so you can stop doing it or do it differently. So it's a matter of liberating people from these ingrained patterns for which they're not to be blamed. So in my world, there's no room for blame whatsoever. But there is room for helping people to become responsible, for helping people being response-able, being able to respond to their circumstances. And without awareness, none of us are response-able. The personality itself is a defensive structure that we develop as a way of dealing with our pain. So much of what we consider to be our personality is actually an overlay upon our true selves. And so these weren't choices in childhood. For example, with my ADD, the tuning out. I never chose to tune out, but when I was an infant under the conditions that I've described of being a Jewish infant under the Nazis, I had plenty of stress on me. And how does an infant deal with stress that they can't change? They tune out. And then the tuning out becomes programmed into my brain. And then so many years later, I'm diagnosed with ADD. It wasn't a choice that I made, it was an adaptation. It's when we get older that we realize that there's something more to us than a personality. That you go through therapy and you go through layers and you realize, oh, that's not actually me. And I'm freer without it. Then you realize that what we thought was the personality was actually just a defensive cover. And once we strip that defense off and we find it no longer necessary, we become much more true to ourselves, much more true to ourselves, so we become much more balanced and happier in our lives.